Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary. Hopefully, you are listening and watching the You Should Know podcast. Today, we have a wonderful guest on, and we're going to learn a lot. Hopefully, you learn a lot as well. We got Pete Dunn on, and our topic today that we're going to be discussing and learning from Pete actually is the hidden cost of ignoring employees' financial health. So, let's just get right into it. Pete has his own podcast, by the way, which is fantastic. Ryan and I have both listened to shows. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But
I feel like I want Pete to interview me.
hey, yeah, see, we could flip this
Although
around.
I don't have much to say on this topic. I
No,
have a lot to say. I don't have expertise
I
on
have
this
zero.
topic, I should say.
I have zero. I would
Yeah.
fail so bad. Pete, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself?
Excellent. Well, William, Ryan, glad to be with you. I'm Peter Dunn. I'm the CEO of Your Money Line. And as you mentioned, I have a bit of a media background as well. I've written for USA Today for a number of years and have a syndicated radio show and podcast, and I've written some books. So I'm obsessed with other people's financial lives, not in like a peeper sort of sense, but more of like, hey, how can I help?
And your company just recently got a Series A, got some funding, right?
That's right. We had a seed round a couple years ago. Grew significantly over those 8 quarters and was able to go back and hook up with some great investment groups and announced our Series A's just a few weeks ago.
That's fantastic in any market,
Congrats.
but especially in this market. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thanks, William.
Where do we start with this particular topic about employees' financial health, but ignoring that? Where would you like to start?
I'd like to start in 1951 if that's far back enough.
100%. Let's go. Right
Okay.
after the war.
Here we go.
Got it.
You know what, William, and you hit on it, because in 1951, when my grandfather came back from the war,
Yeah.
he started working for General Motors, right? And to me, this is where the story begins.
Yeah.
Starts working for General Motors and worked there for 32 years.
Yep.
So
Got a pension. You know, those.
Mhm.
You remember those things?
Yeah.
We've been talking about this forever.
Yeah.
So he retired in 1983. I was at his retirement party. I remember there was cake. I was 6, so I remember. And he had a pension. And the strangest part of this story is that in the early 1970s, Grandpa Dunn didn't work for 2 years because of what we now call PTSD.
Right.
Right. And,
Right.
and so in the 1970s, was it shell shock? They didn't know what to call it.
That's right.
And so, guys, what he had with a pension was financial certainty. That
Right.
no matter what happened, General Motors
You
was
have it.
was gonna take care of them. And he was retired before passing away for 31 years. So 63 years General Motors paid him, and 8 more years to my grandma after he passed away. 70 years, right? And so to me, that's where this starts, because back in the day, in the 1970s, 88% of people had a pension. That means when they retired, they kept getting paid until they died. Today, it's about 10%. And this is problematic because there's always uncertainty in a financial life, and it is no longer being equaled out with a pension.
Right. Go ahead, Ryan.
This is an interesting place to start, Peter, because William and I have had this conversation with many people around the relationship between the employee and the employer and how that's changed over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And I keep coming back personally to this very point. I never had the chance, unless I go into a government job, I've really never had the chance to have a pension. It just wasn't in the cards for me, or really, I guess, for you, William. So the relationship for me has never been there with the employer, because none of my employers actually cared about what I was doing other than getting the work done.
Well, companies now, instead of calling it a pension, they call it a 401k, where they contribute, you contribute. It's not the same. I know.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm just saying from their perspective, that's obviously a huge cost item, a huge liability for them. And so from their perspective, it's like, let's get rid of that liability, and then we'll set them up. They want to invest. They can invest. We can invest. They manage their own investments or whatever we have there. And it's a 401k, and you can take it with you when you go.
Well, very astutely, you just hit the second part of the story, which was in 1978, a retired benefits consultant in Philadelphia by the name of Ted Benna. Which there's always funny when there's a guy in the benefits space with the last name of Benna. It's like
100%.
It's sort of benefits.
Yeah.
He came up with the modern 401k, right?
Wow.
He said, guys, listen to what the purpose of it was: to take highly compensated people and compensate them more. That was the point.
Right.
It wasn't for the every man or every woman's retirement. It was extra compensation. And so by the early 1980s, companies saw this and said, if we bastardize this a little bit,
it would work.
It would work.
Well, it would pass the sniff test.
We got to get rid of this liability.
Yeah. And so then here's the financial relationship between an employer starting in about 1983. It was, we're going to pay you a paycheck. And then later, decades from now, if you put enough money into this thing, you'll be fine. And that was the reality until the early 2010s when financial wellness became a thing.
So there's a couple of things I took from this part here. One, I'm from Philadelphia, so we screwed it all up, as we normally do. And I was born in 1978, so I never had a shot.
Nope, never. Nope,
Never, ever.
No. He created. I think Fidelity, if I remember correctly, Fidelity got into the 401k business in a big way at one point. It might have been the late 80s. Like that was one of their bits is they got in. But Pete, I've always said, and please tear this apart, I've always said that the relationship between employer, employee, and vice versa changed at about the same time that free agency in sports changed. So I've drawn the parallel of basically let's just take baseball as for example. When free agency entered the market, then that bond, whatever that bond was, that bond between owner and player was now everybody's a free agent. The baseball team's free agents and the players are free agents. And so they don't have a long-term commitment to anybody. It was, you have a contract, you're here for the contract, and then that's it. Now, tear that apart, because that's just in my head. I've not read that anywhere. I don't know. I have no evidence to prove that, by the way.
I like it. I like it a lot because I think about, your favorite sports star leaves town to go somewhere else. And then there's an argument amongst the fan base of like, are we supposed to be mad at this person for pursuing their own financial interest or not? I'd say, William, I juxtapose that with the creation of employee engagement culture. And here's why I say that. To me, employee engagement is when a company says, hey, employee, care deeply about our goals here. Okay, care about our goals.
Right.
And what wasn't said during that time is company cares about your personal financial goals. And so if you put those two things together, you get this nastiness of, hey, you're on your own. And by the way, we're not going to suffer if you suffer. When in fact, I think the opposite is true. I think what we've come to learn in this business I've been in it for 25 years now is like when a person struggles financially, while it may not be the employer's problem, it is certainly their problem to solve. And that's the crux of the matter.
Let's maybe unpack that a little bit. It's their problem to solve. It's definitely not their problem. Got it. Makes sense. And I agree with you personally that it is their problem to solve because it benefits them. It's in their best interest if I'm financially sound as their employee. But maybe unpack that a little bit for the audience. What is your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do it is to certainly not endear myself with everyone listening to this right now by asking everyone to think about the worst moment of your financial life. Like, I'm 7 minutes into my friendship with your listeners, and I've just ruined it. All right, so
No,
think
it's
about
good. It's
yeah,
cathartic.
think about
It's good.
it is cathartic.
Yeah,
we may
sure.
need some cocktails or something, but
Yeah.
think about the worst moment of your financial life, and then I want you to think about how your brain went about parsing through it and solving it. How susceptible was that same brain to doing good work in that moment? The answer is it's not. Like
It's not.
It's not even close. You guys, I had a situation than the last couple of years, a family financial situation, outside of my household, but within my family, that was consuming.
Yeah.
Consuming. Arguably, I'm one of the world's foremost experts on this topic, and it was consuming me. And I was so stressed, I couldn't sleep, I had anxiety, and like I wasn't at my best. And so
Right.
the argument here is, in these strange 4.5, 5 years we've all just lived together post COVID or whatever, it's been a dynamic time, which you've got quiet quitting, you've got all these different, you know, things within HR or these cultural events. And so you've got people just confused and not knowing what to do and how to deal with massive housing increases and interest rate fluctuations and promises of student loan forgiveness that then get shot down. It's a confusing time.
Do you think you start as a company? I mean, first of all, 100% agree with you. There's no way to, unless you're a sociopath, there's no way to divorce what's going on in your life outside of work and work. It's just those things bleed over into each other, and sometimes companies like that. They like, in fact, during COVID, it was celebrated that your personal life and your professional life are kind of mushed together. Saw cats on, kids walking in, like you talked about, not being able to buy toilet paper. Like it was celebrated in a way. But where do companies start? Like if they do care and they kind of connect the dots as you've already have for them, where did they start? Do they start with financial literacy? Do they start by opening up a door? Do they start by solving some of the problems? Like where, if they wanted to get into this business and help, even if it was just for productivity's sake, like say there's nothing else philanthropic about the endeavor, and it's just we want them to be operating at a higher gear, so we'll care about this. Where do they start?
Well, in order to help answer that question, I'm going to need to speak quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
You're good.
Please do.
You're in good company.
so there's a couple ways to think this through. First off is like, let's understand if an organization has a problem, and you look at retirement plan contribution levels, you look at how many people in the organization have outstanding 401k loans, you look at wage garnishments, you look at those sorts of things. Now here's the little grosser way to look at it. Look in the parking lot. What are you seeing? Are you seeing $70,000 pickup trucks at a manufacturing facility where that doesn't add up, right?
Right.
Are you seeing things that just simply don't make sense? And that's the rub of American financial culture, is that a person is deemed to be doing well when they buy things they can't functionally afford, and they're viewed to not be doing well when they don't buy those things that would make them unstable. And so what we see like a manufacturing company, 2,000 employees in a small town of somewhere, and the parking lot is just filled with unbelievably expensive vehicles. And if I'm the owner of that company, I can either say, we pay our people well and that's why they have it, or you can say, this does not seem sustainable. These people are not going to retire on time. These people are going to go down the street for $1.50 more an hour to our biggest competitors. And if you're honest with yourself and that's the way you view it, then you can go about solving the problem.
Peter, this is timely. We just released an episode with the global head of talent at Southwest. And one of the key points of the conversation with him was, and William, you if I say this wrong, correct me. He said everybody, his baggage handlers, if they stay with Southwest, will retire multimillionaires because of the way they work with them financially.
That's a provocative statement. I mean, man,
I got that. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what his bit was is where it started, Pete, is it started in the work that they do in grade schools, elementary schools, grade schools, and high schools. They go deep into those schools and teach them about aviation in general, not about Southwest. So instead of you can be a banker, or you can be a lawyer, or you can be a doctor, it's like, hey, there's so many other things that you could be, and it's a broad kind of umbrella of aviation. And his bit was, and we'll find the clip and send it to you, because what he said is, you give me 7 kids, and out of 10 that don't go to college, for whatever reason, they're not going to go to college. You give me them, I can put them anywhere in Southwest. And if they stay for, I can't remember the number of years, 25 years or
Yeah.
30 years, if they stay for, they will retire. So, the other kids in college are going to kind of come out of college and maybe might have an earning wage that's higher, but over the course of time, because of the way Southwest invests in them financially and otherwise, and they stay. So it's kind of like going back to,
Hmm.
your grandfather in a sense of like, okay, if you stay, we'll take care of
Yeah, this is so interesting. This is
you.
me choosing my words, by the way.
Oh no, no, no,
This
no, yeah,
pause is me really thinking through, do I want to say what I want to say? However, here's what I'm willing to say. In
fair
a
enough.
vacuum, that's so true.
Right,
I love people getting into trades, and I love people not necessarily going to college to get their career going. And
right,
yes, we see it all the time. There are people who do that, who become financially stable. They become millionaires because that's just the way the math ends up working. However, that doesn't solve the underlying financial cultural issues that most Americans have in the year 2024,
right.
which is that if you're making good money and you're 19 years old, you don't all of the sudden go, and that's why I'm going to be a millionaire. That's
Right.
why I'm going to drive my $70,000 pickup truck to go throw bags for Southwest. That's what ends up happening. And that's what we try. I don't want to say it's what we try to fix, because to say that is broken is a little on the nose. It's to
Right.
say that's where we try to educate and contextualize that a person's, let's go back to your free agency for a second, William.
Right.
People don't think enough about their career earnings. We think about
Right.
athletes' career earnings all the time.
Oh yeah.
But you never think of like, hey, well, Ryan's career earnings are X. And within that, he must pay for his financial past if he made mistakes. He must pay for his lifestyle now. Oh, and by the way, he must put money away for the future, all with his career earnings. And so that's the lens of what we must look at.
So let me ask a question about living beyond your means, because everywhere we look, it seems, from cities that go bankrupt, from our own, politics aside, our own government not really operating within a budget, companies not really living within their means, and employees not living within their means. So, like, where do they get? Specifically, I'm thinking about people coming out of college, younger people. Where do they get a sense of how to live within their means?
Well, this has a lot to do with how they were raised. And
Yeah.
let's think about a two-parent household for a second, okay? And I'm not going to get into like the
Yeah.
geopolitics of parenting sort of thing, but two-parent household. Both of those parents were raised by different sets of parents. And so they're socialized around money in a certain way. And then when they form their own household, they either do or don't come to some understanding of this is the way this household does it. Now, so there's the functional abilities there that come with debt and savings, but then there's also a mentality of, are we a scarcity household or are we abundance household? And if in whether you have money or not, you can either have a scarcity or abundance mentality.
Right.
And so when you are a byproduct of that, and you create your own household, and maybe you have a romantic relationship with someone that you share finances with, and they have their own, that's where this formula just goes off the rails so fast. And I'll say, guys, I think this is a byproduct of the last 30 years of popular culture is most young workers try to emulate their late adolescent lifestyle as quickly as they can. But that lifestyle was created by their parents who were likely in their prime earning careers.
Right.
And so then they're like, hey, I'm 25. I want to have what I had 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes off the rails.
That's interesting. That's so
And this is
fascinating. Go
just
ahead,
the
Ryan.
parents wanting to do great for their children.
Right. That's like the best
irony.
point of all of this. They're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
they're just loving their kids, trying to give them
Yeah.
opportunity, you know?
Yeah. So they get out of college and they're thinking, I want a lake house, I want a boat, I want all of these things. when their parents had to work for all that stuff for all those years just to get to a place to have those. And they just want it faster.
Now, I'm first of all, as people listen to this, please understand that I'm trying to lay context down
Right.
as opposed to blame, which is very different, right?
100%.
Because the other side of this too is healthcare prices are more expensive than ever, college prices more expensive than ever, housing prices more expensive than ever, and wage growth has not kept up.
Right. 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 So we didn't get here overnight, and we didn't get here for no reason. So, Ryan, did you have a question? I'm sorry, brother.
I just want to know how to fix it.
Yeah.
I know that's a paintbrush broad question.
Well,
where do we start? Like, how do we get there?
All right. So now you get to one of my core beliefs, and it's that the average American has a 60-day black box around their finances. That there's all this data, transactional data even, about a person's reality, what they do, how they act. Yet, most Americans go, hey, we'll see what happens, or fingers crossed, or I hope we have a good month. It's like, no, brother, it's all right there. You're just choosing to keep it in the black box. And so to us here at Your Money Line, surfacing data so people can make data-driven decisions around their finances is what this is all about. I mean, money is the intersection of math and behavior. Math and behavior. The math is what we ignore so we can feel better about the behavior. And so by surfacing data and then also taking into account a person's what we call a money vibe, which is to say, when I look at my bank account, I feel better. Or when I look at my bank account, I feel worse. And everyone's different. Like Ryan, if when you look at your finances, you take comfort because now you know. And maybe your partner in life looks, and when they see it, they feel restricted and they feel worse, and it scares them. That is important, especially as we surface that data. And again, this is at Your Money Line, we have a series of coaches, but we also have software that takes this into account so we can get a person making better decisions.
It's fascinating because better decisions can be something as micro as not eating out versus buying groceries.
Yeah, it's so one of the, William, this is interesting because I saw this online yesterday. Everyone likes to arrive at this stop going to Starbucks point, right? Like this is like the last 15 years of personal
the lazy,
finance.
easy way.
It's just been like, stop going to Starbucks. I would argue that that's just not, I don't want to say it's not realistic advice. I would say it's not helpful advice, right? Like, let's say I'm a single parent with 3 kids and I make $65,000 a year and I want to go to Starbucks and have a $4 pink drink or whatever because it makes me feel like a human.
Right.
For 10 minutes. And I'm going to go, don't do that. That's stupid. That could equal $20,000 someday. Like, I just find that the most insincere thing. And it's so common.
And it's hard to live that way.
Yes.
It's hard to live that way. Yeah. So how do we, okay, so this might be slightly off topic, but I think it's important. There's a lot of gurus online, whether they're entrepreneurial gurus or money gurus, you know the type. They're, you're scrolling through Instagram, Facebook, and they're telling you, do this, do that, don't do that. How do we discern what is good advice versus bad advice for the average worker, for the average parent who's, in your example, $65,000 a year, 3 children, single or 2-income household? Doesn't matter. How do they discern what is good, trustful, credible information?
That's an amazing question. question. And again, I would never call myself a guru, but I live in this world, right? Like the people that choose to follow what I say, why do they decide that? Now I'm a Midwesterner, okay? I'm in Indiana. So my values are, I'm never going to let wealth be the beacon, right? Like I don't think the way I get someone to pay attention to me is to dangle millions of dollars in front of them. I think it's to have contentment and purpose become part of their life. And so, Ryan, to your question, I would say number one, just like any diet, probably stick with one. I mean, that's the thing. You can't do the Atkins diet and then you can't then do some other thing combined and then it kind of doesn't work. So you do have to find one and kind of stick to it. And number two, you have to understand that it is mass advice for a mass audience. and your own story problem that is your financial life likely needs some alternate version of the base plan. And so, look, I without naming names of these gurus, they're all pretty reasonable. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I disagree functionally with a few things here and there, but in the end, it's not going to kill you to follow these folks.
I think some of it is that we as Americans, we're looking for the quick fix. And this is why, people play the lottery, and I think that the next big satchel of money is going to be right around the corner, right? And I think what you've described so far is it's a grind. First of all, you have to take inventory. You have to understand where you're at. You got to, if you're working with your wife or your partner or whatever, you've got to kind of get on the same page, whatever that is, and figure out the behaviors and also how you feel about money, and kind of put the home run or we're going to have one financial windfall. Like I know people in my own life that they're thinking about when their grandmother's going to die and how it's going to be a windfall. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's really dark, but I understand it. I understand it. I understand people playing the lottery on some level. Like I've actually played the lottery. And I always tell people, because when I went to business school, prior to business school, I had to do, oh, not I had to, I did stats camp. And yeah, anyhow, Dr. Thomas Love, I'll never forget this. He just says, who plays the lottery? Like, gets up to so and so, who plays the lottery? He's like, yeah, that's impossible. Statistically speaking, you will never win the lottery. And he broke on all, I mean, literally took a whole whiteboard board, just wrote it all out and showed us how it won't happen. But yet there's the belief, especially in America, the belief that a windfall is just right around the corner. How do, how do we dissuade that, or how do we get people to think differently about the windfall?
I think I've got a reasonable answer for you that. Then I'm going to take our conversation to a very uncomfortable level.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so this statement is so true, and I just need people to listen for a second. Most Americans believe they will be able to retire successfully because somehow, some way, to your point, William,
Yeah.
they will have a lot of money. They don't know how,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. I would argue most Americans will be able to retire because they don't need a lot of money. That is to say, I can take a household of 2 educators, and because they're not too dependent on their income, they will have a path to financial independence. Whereas we've worked with a household of 2 partners at a law firm. But because they live on so much of that income, they're so dependent on it, they need so much money, they can never actually become independent. Now, let's get uncomfortable. These next statements are not judgmental, they're observational.
Right.
We live in a culture right now where, first off, money and nutrition are essentially the same thing. The behaviors, there's more chemical stuff, obviously, with nutrition, but I want you to think of what the biggest craze in fitness and nutrition is in the year 2024, and that's things like Ozempic.
Yep.
All right? And
Yep.
so here we have this age-old problem of having calorie math issues. Again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not judging. And
Right.
there is a solution that is miraculous, and people are flocking to it. There is no financial Ozempic. There is no financial Ozempic. Yet it's the same type of challenges. My biggest challenges in my life, guys, are not financially related. They're nutrition. I make terrible food choices. And I will probably in like an hour and a half, I'm going to put something in my face that's a bad idea. I know I'm going to do it.
Grab a
Right?
Taco Bell.
Yeah.
I can so relate to this.
Yeah. And so it's like, so think about your get out. Again, I like talking about this, but I just don't want anyone to feel like hurt, honestly.
Right.
Like, so Ozempic is this amazing solution. And I'm thankful for those that it's helping.
Right.
I've not personally chosen to go that route, although I know it would help me. Financially, as we go, well, what's the version of that? Is it credit card usage that gets forgiven? Like, what is it? And it doesn't exist. And I think that's where some of these challenges get interesting. Is it, oh, well, that's why I have to invest in crypto? Or is that why I have to become an online influencer? And so you try to see people solving this same problem, and it just doesn't work.
Forever take this away between the finance and nutrition, money and nutrition, and how they run parallel. I'll go to my grave with that information because I see myself making poor decisions on both fronts.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Like for me, I'm just speaking the truth of my own truth. Like I make terrible food decisions, and arguably terrible drink decisions too. But the thing with money is when I get paid, I think I get I don't even know what today is. The 15th, I think, is the next time I get paid. I know that I will take care of business before anything else happens, right? I will fund what I need to fund. I will pay off what I need to pay off. And then whatever money's left over, because I don't really use the credit cards, I'm not going to get in trouble. Like I can actually solve for that. Food-wise, I'm always going to eat. I'm going to the buffet.
Does that enable that behavior? Because you've taken care of the business and you've got this little pool of money left over. And it's like, this is discretionary income. I can use it any way that I want to. Does that enable the decisions that you make in nutrition and drink?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh my gosh, that's super interesting. Because to me, look at me learning about finance on your show, right? Because to me, I've always viewed this as, well, I'm not going to make a mistake financially because I've already taken care of whatever. So who really cares? But what that turns into is spending the money.
That's right.
On the chicken wings.
Hey,
Damn
chicken
it,
wings can be healthy. Let's just
okay.
They don't have
Let's
to
not
be
hate on the
breaded.
wings. Yeah.
But you've taken care of business. So the important part is where a lot of Americans, they don't take care of the financial part first. They go and feed whatever things that they need to feed. And again, that $75,000 truck or whatever that is, they'll go feed that and then make decisions around nutrition and drink that aren't great for them. But they never took care of business. So I mean, at least you're taking care of business.
Well, on pizza night, sometimes my wife will be like, "Do you want some salad?" And then I'm like, "Is that taking care of business?"
Come on now.
And I'm like, "Well, not unless there's a lot of blue cheese." No,
I'm
it's just making
myself.
you feel a little better, a little better. So, Peter, I got a question here, just to bring it back a little bit to decisions. So, what is that? And I know it's different for every person. But what is that point that you see, or kind of a red flag might go up where the person's making the wrong decision? Let's use the truck, for example, or a car. You can't really find a truck for less than, $50,000, $60,000. Where's that red flag? Do you say, okay, maybe you don't need a truck, you can get this type of car? Or is it not the decision? Is it more of the foundation of how they're building their family, their finances? What's your take there?
Yeah, couple things. First off, in a very functional, pragmatic sense, that's why financial goals matter. Right. Because if you don't have financial goals and then you go make a dumb decision, you're measuring that dumb decision against nothing. So therefore, the dumb decision doesn't feel dumb.
Right.
If you're measuring the dumb decision about your inability to accomplish your goals, then that becomes a problem. But on a much more anecdotal level, if you've ever, and I'm guessing you guys have done this because I know I have. If you've ever said to yourself, you get in a jam and then you go, never again will I let this happen. And then you find yourself back in that jam. Like that is the ultimate red flag of like, maybe I should try a completely different methodology here.
Yeah.
Well,
it's someone that drinks, and I drink everything. So it's someone that drinks and then they get hammered. They wake up the next day and I don't like the way I feel. And then 3 weeks later, they do the exact same thing. So I think there's some Pavlovian stuff in here that seems interesting to me. Is like we need to find reward differently in both finance and in nutrition. We need to find something rewarding about looking at our bank account. So it's almost like a rewiring of our brains to say, you know what, have goals, check. Because if you don't have goals, you're rudderless. You don't really know where you are in the process. So having goals is one, but also in small victories, taking pride in making good decisions along the way to your journeys. So it's like that endorphins and stuff that it kick in your brain when you make a good decision. If true, how do we get people to do that?
So I think we can all say, and I don't want to be the person that uses the word addiction incorrectly, but I think we can all become enamored with spending. Like, I
Right.
think we've all been there, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like, oh, that felt good. I
Yeah.
had a buddy tell me the other day that when you collect things, if you're a collector of anything, like whether it's bourbon or watches or paintings or whatever, right? Or you're
I
collecting things.
collect bourbon to then leave bourbon.
That's
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's
So the
temporary
the
collection.
dopamine hit
Right.
comes with the acquisition of whatever it is. And so let's say bourbon's a great example. Let's say you've been looking for a $50 bourbon and you find it. So you get the dopamine hit of that $50 bourbon. But let's say you start hunting for a $150 bourbon, you find it, then that dopamine hit is associated with that price level. And
Right.
now you're not going to feel as good as when you find the $50 bourbon. So
Right.
that's a thing. And I would say you can actually get addicted to saving. You really can get addicted to saving. Whereas, you might just look at your savings account all the time to see it going up. Like, that is the thing. And we see people cross over into that. It
Right.
takes a lot of work, but that's where sacrifice turns into self-control. And that's what this is about. Of like, yes, you have to sacrifice to attempt to change the never again situation. And if you stick with it long enough, that self-control is such a wonderful feeling.
That is really interesting, Peter, because I am the saver, and it is a massive hit, dopamine hit, as you say, when I can go grocery shopping and not spend money. I don't like the coupon. I don't take time for all of that. But there's something in me walking through the grocery store and not buying it.
Are you
Just
talking
getting
about
the bare
shoplifting?
minimum.
You're talking about shoplifting.
Yeah, shoplifting. Yeah.
Okay, well,
It's
this
like
is
the
great.
bare minimum. And at some point, or letting the refrigerator run out of food
Yeah.
before we go empty the freezer so I don't have frozen foods in there. And the kids hate it. Why do
Yeah.
you do this? And it's like, sometimes I stop and think, well, why did I do it? It's not a money thing. It's not I don't want to eat the food thing. I'm just tired of seeing it in the refrigerator and nobody's eating it. I don't know, but it is a hit. Like, I feel it and it's a rush. It's interesting.
Ryan, I think again, whatever you're going to name this episode, but food and money, I don't know. But I'll say this, that understanding the difference between satisfaction and pleasure is really important. Like food, if I'm going to go eat some garbage here in about an hour, am I going to seek pleasure or am I going to seek satisfaction, which is to know I ate something that made sense and then afterwards I can feel good about it. Money-wise, there's pleasure in spending money. There's pleasure of shopping online, but there's satisfaction in knowing you didn't buy something you shouldn't have. And I think understanding that difference and what triggers and what you chase is so important.
So I need to get your take on this. I've told people that not to believe that Social Security will be around when they need it.
Please be wrong.
So no, I think that in our generation, people my age and younger, I'm like, it won't be there. That just won't be there. And if you think it's there, like if you're building your life around, I'll get to a certain age, I'll retire, and Social Security will take care of me for the rest of my life, I just don't buy it. I've never bought it. Like even when I was younger, I'm like, yeah, that's a fantasy. That's just not going to be there. The government's going to find a way to get out of that responsibility.
This is a tough one. I mean, I could go 2 hours on this. No one has time for this, but I'll go as succinct as I can. The math supports you.
Okay.
The math supports you.
Yeah.
And by the way, math is undefeated. So
Turns
that's
out.
always good to know. Math is undefeated. As I tell my
Like
daughter.
Father
who's 15.
Time.
Yeah. That is functionally true.
Yeah.
However, so many decisions are not being made around that topic that you just keep kicking the can down the road.
Right.
That it doesn't even make sense anymore. And so, like, the idea of, like, well, once it gets so bad you can't fix it, then there's nothing you can do. I have this mindset now of, like, the decisions not being around it makes no sense whatsoever right now. Whatever I think is going to happen later probably won't happen because of the same level of thinking, right? And so it's just like, I'm 46. Don't let the hairline fool you. I'm 46 years old. I'm not counting on Social Security being around for me. Like, I'm accounting for something different. But given all the other challenges we just talked about today, people seeing their parents and grandparents retire with pensions, people not putting the right amount on their 401ks, those people who are struggling to make the good decisions in their current life right now, If you go to them and say, oh, by the way, whatever retirement you thought was going to be there is not going to be there, you've got a whole other massive, massive problem that's much worse than we thought. How uplifting.
Sounds like not a good way to end it, but I think
No,
we end.
it's exactly the way to end it. Well, because this is the part of the whole thing about financial literacy is
Yeah.
we can't dodge these things. These are things that we should be actually running straight into, not dodging. So we could talk to you forever. You're just a wonderful, wonderful guest. So thank you so much for carving out time for us and our audience. And that's it. Appreciate you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Thanks to the audience. Do all that stuff that you do on podcasts. We appreciate you.